Welcome to another episode of Doubl3Tap. Today we are joined by Chris Heatherly, founder of Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. They are currently making Mystery Society. Chris, you have a decorated career. Very excited to be chatting to you today. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you for having me on.
Cool. Quick disclaimers out the way. Uh, the purpose of this content is for informational and educational purposes only. It's not should not be considered as financial advice. The opinions shared by Alex and I are our own, and we may have personal or professional investments in some of the projects or assets discussed throughout the show. With that out the way, Chris, what games are you currently playing?
I wish I had a more exciting answer to this question. Um, I'm playing a lot of the Mystery Society because because we're in beta and I have to do a lot of QA. I've been playing a little Lethal Company. I'm I'm I want to play. I'll tell you what I want to play is Alan Wake. I've been meaning to play Alan Wake, but I kind of need a time where you know, where I can commit the time to play a longer like AAA game. It's something that I think is going to be a big trend in games actually, and it kind of plays into what I'm doing with Mystery Society, which is that I think there's a big backlash against games that take all your time, and especially with these live service games, like there's a lot. Yeah, I think you've probably seen like on LinkedIn and other places, like there's a lot of people that are like starting to backlash against and in the businesses in general with consumers against these like live service games that don't really make sense as a live service game. Like I was just reading about the Warner Brothers Suicide Squad game, and people are like, why does that has to be live service and forever, and ever or whatever they call it, evergreen. Um, so I think that my own like time pressures have made me want to make games that respect people's time, and I think there's going to be a big appetite for that. There's like a backlash against a lot of things that happened over the last 10 years, like forever, live operated games that have, no that are just a grind, or like over tutorialization. I mean, like Minecraft was the original game with no with no tutorial, and you just get thrown in, and that generation, right, has grown up now, and they're used to exploring and discovering. And the other thing is, like, with streaming is so important now to game making, and like if you do too much handholdy and games are too linear, then it's no fun for the community or the streamers, right? Because there's nothing for them to talk about because everyone's going to get the same shit. So what you really want is like a game where people have to come in and discover and find things, and then that gives them lots of stuff to talk about on social media and make videos about. And, oh, did you know you can do this? Did you know you can do that?
You've discussed quite a lot this idea of the free to play gaming industry is starting to see a bit of a pivotal change, this shift from games as apps to games as content. I'm curious on your thoughts of like what kind of impact this may have on the future of like indie content, both from the context of like inside these games as a platform like UEFN and Roblox, and then also outside sort of standalone titles.
When I talk about games as content, I made this post last year on LinkedIn that got a lot of attention, about where I kind of postulated that games as content was the next phase. And it was really in response to UEFN getting announced. And if you look at the progression from, I mean, we're getting ready to head into GDC again. I mean, when I first made that post, I remember that Eric Kress from Deconstructor Fun reached out to me, and he's like, "Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying, but I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical." Those guys are always kind of skeptical, which is their job to be. But um, you know, if you look at it, like Roblox is hitting all time traffic highs, and it's really you see a flood of brands and IP and fashion brands and new things being done with Roblox that really I think are legitimately going after an older audience than the kids audience that they started with. If you look at UEFN, I think it's got a much longer way to go. But with this relaunch that they did with bringing back OG Fortnite and then rolling into the Lego stuff, and then making a big push on UEFN. Um, Fortnite has become the most played game on PlayStation. I think on Xbox as well. From a user perspective, and it's being supported by the main modes of the game have gotten a lot of play, right? Like the OG event with Fortnite, definitely that wasn't UGC, but um, there is a lot, but UGC has become a big part of it, and you look at developers like I think it's First North, the or Front North with the Alex Seropian's group, who, Alex was one of the founders of Bungie and, did Marathon and Halo and is, I worked with him at Disney. He's one of the smartest guys I know in the games industry. The fact that somebody with that pedigree is now focused on doing games for, Unreal, like, Fortnite creative mode is pretty wild. Um, and there's so many dimensions to it, because I think you've also seen like the rise of the meme game, right? Stuff like Always Going Up, Bed Wars, um uh there there's other examples that I'm blanking on because they've come and gone, but you see these game kind of ideas, that these memes that we're used to memes in kind of GIFs and videos and, stuff on YouTube or TikTok or whatever. And now we're seeing games. In fact, I was just looking at, I just saw an article about how somebody's been taking all Mr. Beast videos and making them into UFN levels. And, you know, like it, it, I think that the games as content era, when I first made that post, people, you know, a lot of people were like, well, no, it's games as a platform, because what they wanted to focus on was the platform element. It's like, oh, it's, like really what you should be invest, because everyone thinks like, what should I invest in? So, it's like, well, really you should be buying Epic shares, or you should be investing in Roblox. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, but also there are going to be whole businesses, just like there are whole businesses that are built on TikTok or built on top of YouTube. There are going to be whole businesses that in their own right are investable, that are built on top of these things. And the composure of what those studios are going to look like is they're going to be smaller teams that are going to be much quicker to market at a much lower cost, which means they're going to be able to try and do wackier shit, because it's not going to be the risk that it was. And they're going to be some hybrid between a game developer and a YouTube creator. I mean, I advise GameFam, which is the largest Roblox professional content creator and has been one of the more successful. And a lot of the stuff that they do that's really successful is stuff like Barbie or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or things that they do with brands. But another big part of their business is partnering with these, what they call Robloxians, who are like, native Roblox people who, are these creator developer types, and helping them kind of professionalize what they're doing with analytics and best practices, and helping them learn how to grow and sustain their games. And that's, I mean, it's a lot of what like somebody like a Mr. Beast does in his business, in the way that they think about what they're doing. And so I think that that it's gonna lead to a new type of, it's not your traditional uh AAA game developer. It's kind of this hybrid of content creator. Some of them will actually be personalities with names that we know. There will be developers. I mean, like this guy that did Lethal Company. I'm blanking on his name, but like he was a Roblox guy, right? And he had a following from Roblox. And then he made this game. And he spun it out, and people knew him for Roblox, and so they gave the game a try on Steam. And I think we're just gonna see more and more of that. And it's gonna change who can come into the industry. And I just think you're gonna see a lot more. It's gonna make games in some sense more ephemeral. There's this, there's a lot of people, like, kind of the midwit take right now going around is like, oh, there's too many games. And it's like, well, what is that? I mean, what does that even mean? Like, it's not that it's too many games. It's that one. I mean, we could get into how the macroeconomics have reshaped the entire games industry, which I think nobody is talking about, because inflation is one of the biggest change makers in kind of how we should be thinking about our space. Um, but I also think that in addition to kind of the inflationary pressures, like the speed and the cost at which you can build and deploy content onto these UGC platforms, as those start to mature, I I think that it's going to put a lot of pressure on, um like, if you're a small scale game studio, and it's going to be all about where can you go to get the most pickup. Like, we're seeing all these games that can start to break through on Steam, but the reality is there's a very small number that break through. Now, I think what Steam is showing is that that these breakthroughs are not just happening once and again, they're happening, like, pretty frequently. Even though they're the minority of cases, like, when they break out, they're breaking out big. But if you have a small team of, like, 5 people, you know, you're going to have to make a decision between, do I build my own standalone game? Is that really what I want to do? In which case, I take on a lot more in terms of, like, marketing and distribution, and you become more like a business where there's a lot of other aspects to what you do other than make games. Or am I going to build for these UGC platforms and surf off the fact that they've got tens of millions of users, and try to launch my idea there? In fact, Shrapnel, I saw, I thought it was so freaking clever. They did a map for UEFN. Did you guys see this? Um, so they did a Shrapnel map, while they're still in development with their standalone game, and I was like, that's freaking brilliant. You go into one of the biggest shooters in the industry right now. You build your map, and give people a taste of Shrapnel, and create something to keep the community rallied while you build the full game. Like, that's brilliant. So I think we're going to see a lot of, like, really interesting stuff shake out of it. And I think it's time. I think the games industry, you know, has just become too monolithic, and it's become too um owned by middlemen. Like, we spend part of the reason I went into Web3 is I'm sick of fucking talking about Apple's rules, and, like, what Apple's going to allow and not allow. Like, I just want to be creative and do cool stuff, and it's so I think that they're um I think that you're going to see, so I think the industry is needed to shake up. and it needs to kind of get around some of these middleman intermediators, even though some of these platforms can be that. In other ways, they free you because they give you, they give you an existing audience, and they give you a lower cost of development, and they put you in a position, hopefully, to try things. You know.
So you mentioned how you're kind of seeing this shift, and there's kind of the allure of blockchain giving you a little bit more creative freedom. So, you discussed a little bit about how blockchain or Web3 might give you a little bit of creative license. Another thing that you've talked about is this concept of community-based games. I'm
Hmm.
curious if you could kind of maybe elaborate a little bit on how you think maybe Web3 or the blockchain enables this sort of kind of bottoms up sort of community cultivation, um, and how you think that will drive, maybe a different type of engagement with games, maybe a different type of game. Don't want to put words in your mouth, but yeah, would love to hear your take.
I think that ownership is a really important concept at a fundamental level. I was listening to someone the other day talk about kind of political philosophy, and they were talking about the importance of private property in wealth creation, and in improving your economic circumstances. And what struck me is that, in the digital space, with the exception of the games, I think games have been the one thing where, you own it, because you pay your $60 and you get a disc. But most of the internet has been free with ads, right? That's been the predominant model for most of the internet. And as a result, you haven't had a lot of wealth creation, actually, as much as you would expect. And so what you see are like these huge, right now it's the big seven, right, that are driving the S&P 500. The Googles, the Apples, the Amazons, these guys are engorged with money. But if you look at the creators on a lot of these social platforms, you know, they don't make a lot of money off the social platforms themselves. They make the money off of, Mr. Beast is making it off candy bars, and other people are making it off Patreon or whatever. And so, there hasn't been a lot of, there hasn't been the type of sharing of wealth that really should happen in a UGC environment where, and I'm talking about social media here, where what people are consuming is made by these creators, right? The creators are not getting their fair shake. When you come into the game space, I think the analogy to that is that community has been this kind of like free benefit that that game makers have just come to expect, that, like, hey, if I make a good game, like, somebody's going to create a Discord, and somebody's going to create a YouTube channel, and somebody's going to create a TikTok thing, and it's just all going to happen like magic because I make this good game, and everybody's going to go out and celebrate it for me. And the thing is that I think the creator culture, if you look at surveys of, and it's been this way for probably about a decade, if you look at surveys of like what's the most aspirational career for a kid in high school, like TikTok creator or YouTube creator, is always top of that list. And so this idea of being um, of creating content and getting paid for it and be able to make a living doing that on the internet is something that is very kind of like top of mind for this generation, right? And increasingly, I think younger people are rightfully saying, like, hey, wait, I've like worked really hard to build this social reach. Like, what's in it for me, So, if you put those ideas together, it's like this concept of digital ownership, and the ability to share revenue with your audience, um, has the potential to be incredibly powerful and change a lot of the dynamics in the games industry. Because another thing that another reason that I left free to play gaming was, um, I made this game called Funko Pop Blitz, which had the Funko toy IP, had all the Universal characters in it. We had Doctor Who, we had Peanuts, we had probably more IP at one time than any mobile game has ever had, or one of the most, like, most games, maybe they have an IP or two at a time, and we had dozens. And the game had great metrics. It wasn't that the metrics were terrible. The metrics were great, but it was really hard to break through with all of Apple's privacy changes and all this other stuff. And I just got really pissed because I was like, this sucks. Like, I made this great game. People think it's fun. It's got great IP behind it. The business rationale for this, like, it all should work. But this ad market has become impossible, and you can't get your game. It's so winner take all in the auction, right? Because it's like, because somebody's got a higher LTV than you, because they've been out longer than you, so they can beat you in every ad in the ad auction every single time, and it becomes very hard to break through in that kind of zero sum environment. And so I was just like, this sucks. There's got to be a better way to do this. And what I like about Web3 is the idea that we can say, okay, we can circumvent all that. And instead of giving, these free to play companies are, if you look at like Monopoly Go, there's articles that are saying that Monopoly Go, like, oh, they made $1 billion, but they spent $1.5 billion in UA. And it's like, that's fucked. Like, who wants that? That's a terrible business. And by the way, I don't know what LTV they're buying, or what payback window they're buying on, but like, the break even for some of those users could be 180 days, 365 days. So that type of like crazy spending, when you have a lot of like Saudi capital, or in the zero interest period where it becomes easy to attract capital, you can do that kind of stuff, but it gets a lot harder to do in this economic environment. Anyway, so the thing to me is, like, I look at that and I go, that's fucking broken and sucks. And meanwhile, you've got all of this army of young people out there who, like, they're entrepreneurial in their mindset. They want to be creators. They want to do something in the games industry. And what do these guys like to do? They won't shut up about games. They want to make videos about them. They want to make threads about them. They want to make TikToks about them. They want to stream about them. And like, instead of giving all this money to freaking public companies, what if we gave it, like, shared it with our players and created incentives for them to promote the games, and not just to promote, but actually to be, this is the thing about ownership, like, have a stake in the game. If you buy land, or you buy a virtual item that's a generator of resources that somebody needs, you actually own something in a real economic sense that other people need and need to access. You own something rare, and so therefore if you're in Pixels or something, and you're building your best Pixels island, you're adding value to that virtual real estate. It's not just that you own it, but that you're cultivating it and making it fun and making it something people can play. Or Nifty Island, is doing this. And so, you're engaging your players in a whole new way, which is like, it's not just that they're making, if you go back to this thing of, it's the Minecraft generation grown up, it's not just that they're making this stuff for kind of themselves or for their friends to play with, but now they can make stuff and actually earn something off of it. And I think that you fast forward today, like, the community based thing gives these enthusiastic, these game enthusiasts a way to become part of the games industry and use the skills that they have. They may not be great game makers, but maybe they can make videos, or maybe they can make threads or whatever, and allows them to contribute in the way that they can, and to be remunerated for that. And all of that ultimately, I think, accrues back to the game, because that's the thing that they want, that's the thing that they're invested in. And I think that what Web3 allows us to do is systematize that, and provide a lot of interesting royalty sharing ideas and different ways to create financial incentives to actually turn this into a sustainable business, and not something where we just hope that the fans do it, because like we're actually creating mechanics in our business that incentivize this behavior. And it's like, if you feed something, you should expect to get more of it, right? And so you have to, I do think you have to be careful about the speculative activity. And this is something that Alex and I have talked a lot. I think you feed that beast at your own peril. Like, I think the my thesis anyway is that what you're trying to attract are people who are gonna, even if they plan to cash out at some point, that at least they add value, real value, before they do, right? I think that's the trick, is like, they have to you have to have them do something that is additive to your community, or it's purely extractive, and you're not going to last very long. So it's freaking hard. I mean, like, there's a reason that a lot of these early games have not worked. I think there will be a lot more failures on the way to figuring this out, but I just look forward to, like, if you just look at how YouTube and other social media, other scale digital platforms have grown up, like, there's no influencer on those platforms that didn't make money. Like, they're in business. Some of them are doing a combination of what they like and enjoy and what they're paid to promote, but they're all in some kind of business. And I think that, you know I just can't imagine that 10 years from now, that communities are still going to be doing all the stuff that they were doing, 5 years ago, for free. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think, and nor do I think that it works as a purely paid model where it's all like hiring a marketing agency. Like, I think it has to be some combination of, like, hobby I earn from. Like, that's the sweet spot kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's this idea of like aligned incentives, right? But still making it sustainable and trying to limit extraction as much as possible. But there will, like, people are always going to try and game the system, and that's where it gets really tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that just about brings us to the end of this episode. Chris, I want to thank you for coming on. It's been really interesting.
Thank you.
Cool. And yeah, hopefully have you on again in a future episode.
Yeah, I'd love to.
The content of this video is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. The views shared by Alex and I are our own, and we may hold investments in some of the companies or digital assets featured in the video.